Good evening. Afternoon, whatever it is to some of us. I wasn't planning on opening too, so Andrew and Stevie said go for it. Glad you guys could make it today. Hope everybody's had a great week. Been following along with our devotions this week. I tell you, in the short time that I've been at this church, this is the most connected church I've ever been to, because there's something going on every day. And if that's not a lifeline straight to Christ, I don't know what is. And if you say that I feel disconnected, you've probably not been coming here very long. You're probably not very involved, because there's something for everybody every day. But with that said, I'm not Jason. I'm not going to sing tonight. So if anybody has any prayer requests, we'll start with that. Absolutely.
So we have a daughter and her family that are going to be flying to Chicago in the morning, so remember them for travel mercies.
Just remember the mission team. We're not very far from them leaving. Brother TJ and his wife and family are at the beach, so safe travels for them. I'm not by no means a political person at all, or keeping up with the world and what goes on. And I'm still in that young of, I only see what's past the end of my nose kind of thing, I don't really dig in. But my grandmother seems to want to remind me of that very quite often. And I tell her all the time, I'm like, Grandma, you trying to scare me? You trying to scare me? But it's a scary time, especially, I was just thinking about it the other night, the situation that our world's in for my kids. My dad always told me growing up, he's like, son, this ain't the world to raise kids in anymore. And I never really understood him until I got older, but it is true. We're living in scary times. Anybody else? Isaiah's got a long road to recovery.
I also have a special unspoken prayer.
Anybody else have an unspoken? Well, I know tonight's kind of laid back, but I've always liked it when I prayed to come to the altar and bow my head down and on my knees before the Lord. So if you would like to join me at the altar tonight, I would ask Brother Stevie if he'd lead us in prayer for all those that would want to come.
Brother Drew, I have a friend who called and said that he and his wife have a friend over in Abington, and she has gone through cancer and treatments and everything, been declared clean, but today she was to have her first mammogram, so he was asking for prayer for good results.
Yes, for sure. All right, so tonight, our study, our title, I always like to give everything a title. I don't know why I like to do that. But it's going to be called Surrendering to God. A lot of us, when we talk about surrendering, we had to surrender at one point in our lives when we came to the altar. That was our first surrender to Christ and the biggest and most important time. But for a Christian, we have to surrender to God's calling. And a lot of us tend to want to make these at the bottom. Excuses. I am the front runner in that one. Okay? I wrote the book when it comes to excuses. But for what I want to look at tonight and what I want to discuss, and I say that, man, and I see so many great people involved in this church. And it is an inspiration to me. And I was just telling TJ that the other day, that every time that I've had the opportunity to speak, I felt like that I needed to come up with this world-changing sermon because there are so many great people in here. And to stand behind such great people when they speak. I told him I felt like I was Bush League compared to the major leagues, standing up here. But he assured me that I was not. But it's time to stop making excuses. And there's so many excuses throughout the Bible that so many people use, so many great people, and it's kind of baffling when you go through and you run away. And the main one that I want to use tonight, we're going to be in Exodus 3 is where we're going to start at. So Exodus, I want to go back to the front of the Bible, and let's get a real good feller that everybody knows that started with excuses early, and that was Moses. When I started looking at this, I said, man, you mean to tell me Moses made excuses? The Moses, the one that parted the Red Sea, the one that led God's people out of Egypt. Moses made excuses, just like Drew Tucker. Yeah. So first, I want to look at what an excuse is. It's a reason or explanation put forward to defend or justify a fault or offense. So just so we can better understand what an excuse is, it's a poor or inadequate example of. You imagine giving God and being able to speak straight to God. We're still on this lifeline that Moses and everybody in the Bible was, of being able to be connected to God and be able to speak to God. We're still in that connection. But imagine getting that reverberation back from God when you give him that excuse. And we're going to see that. So we're going to use Moses as an example. Exodus 3 is where we're going to start. So we'll start with verse 10. It says, "Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." So the excuses start early. As soon as, Moses and God started talking here, and Moses is up on top of the mountain. This is where the burning bush is happening. This is what's all taking place. And Jesus gives him a good one-liner. I'm ready for you to go get my people. And Moses, buddy, he's ready to get after it here. Verse 11, he says, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children out of Israel, or bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?'" So as soon as the conversation starts, Moses says, "Who am I?" How many times has God called on you and you said, "God, who am I?" When I was younger, God said, "It's your time to preach. I want to call you to the pulpit. I want to call you to do my work." I said, "God, who am I? I'm an unworthy little dude from Kentucky that's not worthy." Moses said the same thing. He said, "I'm not qualified. I'm not good enough. I don't have the experience." But the funny thing is, when you hear that, I've never heard anybody say that about a job. You always are qualified. You always have the experience. And you always want more pay. Ain't that funny? And when it's for our benefit, we have it. But when it's for God's benefit, we don't. He said, "Why do you want me, God? I'm a nobody." Look what God said in verse 12. He said, "But I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt. You shall serve God on this mountain."
But he said, I will be with you. And what more do we need? What more do I need when any other time in my life when I go through something, when I sat with Holly and watched her take chemo and I felt alone, God said, I'll be with you. When I dug a real good friend out from underground and I sat at the house for a year and I was ready to commit suicide because I saw no end or light at the end of the tunnel, God said, I'm still with you. I didn't leave you. What more do we need? Isaiah 41:10, you don't have to turn over there, but it says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. It says, fear not. I get afraid often. I was nervous coming out here. That's just our earthly body. That's our flesh and bone, trying to push away what God has called us to do. So look at verse 13. The next excuse. One wasn't good enough. God come back to him. So he said, I'm going to give him another one. That's all my little boy likes to do all the time. Full of excuses. And Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your father has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? You're saying, your people's not going to believe me, God. I said, God, people don't want to listen to me stand and talk and ramble on. It's not me, Lord. It's not me. Pick somebody else. Moses is pleading for the lack of knowledge at this point. That he doesn't even know God's name. And how often is it that we play dumb to get out to avoid? I mean, that's instantaneous. That's like our number one coping mechanism now, is to play dumb. I don't know, man. I don't know. How oftentimes do you hear that? A lot. We play dumb. In 14, God comes back and says, Moses, I am who I am. That's enough. Say to the people this of Israel, I am has sent you. Pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward comeback. He didn't beat around the bush. He didn't say, you go tell the people that I will do this and I will do that and I'll give them this or I'll give them that. And he just said, just go tell them I said. He is the great I am, the one and only true King, that we often forget how great, mighty, and powerful our God is. Man, how often and so true is it that Christianity and this Bible and this church and our religion is so watered down in this day and time that we don't take it serious. I remember when I was a kid and we went to church, number one, you dressed up every Sunday. You weren't going to church if you didn't have your Sunday best on. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the dress. I'm just saying we water down things. When people went before the Lord, they often put on the best thing that they had. They showered, they shaved, and they put on perfumes, and that's how they went before the Lord with who I am as my best. How oftentimes do we think back to when I was in school, the Ten Commandments still hung up? You know? We've let it get watered down. Look at God's promise in Exodus 3:15 through 18. And I'm going to read that. I didn't put it up. I kind of got lazy today at school. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, that God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, I can't pronounce that one, the Jebusites, a land
flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to them, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now, please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, and that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. So when Jesus called Moses into these verses, he comes back and says, I want you to gather the elders. Can't do it alone, but I want you to gather the elders and take the elders with you. The elders in the church, they play a vital importance. Can't write them off. Elders throughout time, you can't put them to the side because there's a reason. They've been there. They've been through things. They not necessarily went and delivered God's people out of Egypt, but they're there to help guide Moses. Look in Exodus 4:1. It says, Then Moses answered, But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, The Lord did not appear to you. Here comes Moses' excuses again. When was the last time you made an excuse? Sure, it just hits you right in the forehead when you were asked to do something. I thought on the way out here I should probably introduce myself again because if anybody didn't know, I'm a school teacher. When I got out of school, I live at the lake quite a bit. So, I've been gone. So my excuses, I've got excuses too, which are not relevant. But I don't believe I can fulfill my calling. I doubt the outcome. I doubt the process. A lot of times when God asks something of us, we want the full now. God, I want a mega church. And then we make it about ourselves. Did you catch what I said in that? Not what you want. Moses could have come at that and said, why don't you just deliver them and I'll be waiting on them? It could have played out different. 4:2, the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. This was one of the first times Moses had seen anything happen between him and God. This is the first time. You imagine throwing a stick on the ground and it crawling away. I hate snakes to begin with. I would just think it was a random act of me throwing a stick down and a snake crawling away, you know. There's my excuse. God, I just randomly hit a snake. That really wasn't that piece of wood I just threw down. But no matter what God asks of us or what he calls us to do, we're better off if we just do it. How oftentimes have you made the excuses and you've ramped it up in your head of this is how it's going to go and this is the situation and these are the circumstances and everything has to meet at this exact appointed time and everything has to go this certain way and it doesn't go that way and it ends up better than what you imagine. There's a better outcome because God was involved. Why should we doubt the outcome? Instead, we want to point fingers at those that are trying and how we can do it better. That's the one thing that kills me. Oftentimes, you hear in the shadows that people want to point fingers at Brother TJ and say, well, if he would have done this, it probably would have went a little bit better if he would have done it this way. Or if they would have done Bible school this way, it probably would have went a little better. They would have had more people show up. And instead of getting involved, we want to point fingers how it could be done better. Verse 10, but Moses said to the Lord, oh, my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. The excuses continue here. The excuses continue. So now Moses is saying, I don't speak well enough. So Moses, he's trying to throw blame on anywhere that he can to make excuses with God to run away from this. In 11, then the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or see or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Oh man, what an answer. I told you that I'm not eloquent enough. I don't talk good enough. I forgot you're the one that created me. I forgot that in an instant you can take this from me. Moses still wanted to fulfill his calling. He wanted to throw Aaron under the bus. If you read on, he wanted to give it to Aaron. He said, God, give it to Aaron. Let him take this task on. Let somebody else do it. He wanted to pass it off, just like we've talked about that we like to do. But for myself, for my family, for my relationship with Christ, this is what has to happen. My excuse has got to stop. Let me get Jeremiah pulled up here. I apologize. Joys of technology. It's there. Jeremiah 1, 5 through 8. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, Lord God, behold, I do not know how to speak, for I am only a youth. But the Lord said to me, do not say I'm only a youth. For to all whom I send you, you shall go. And whatever I command you, you shall speak. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. So to stop making excuses, you don't have to be asked to do something to stop making excuses. You can stop and make excuses like my word, excuses for yourself. Because you're hindering yourself, you're keeping yourself drawn away. You're not letting yourself fully take in Sunday morning what God has for you. Because you're on the defense as soon as you step foot in the door. You're on the defense of, God, I'm coming to listen, but I don't want you to call me to do anything. I don't want to be asked. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just going to mosey right on out the door after service is over with, keep my head down so Brother TJ doesn't ask me to do a weekly devotion to where I have to be in front of people. There's all kinds of things. There's excuses made. If you think excuses aren't made, this church is full of excuses. Every church is full of excuses. Every Christian's full of excuses. If that was the case, we wouldn't be living in the world we're in. Because we let excuses water down Jesus. We let excuses water down our nation. We let excuses water down our leaders, those people that we put forth. So how do you surrender to God? For salvation? Surrender in salvation. Well, I just surrendered to Christ that one time when I was standing back on this side of the church in Myra, Kentucky. And Just As I Am came on every Sunday. I still can't listen to that song. Can't talk about it. But I had to surrender. I had to make the confession to Christ. I had to come up here and I had to kneel down. But Just As I Am comes on. It's like every time I hear, God wears me out. Have you lived your life with a calling that you've ran from? I'd hate to say that I don't know what that's like. I do know what that's like. And it's a miserable life to live. How miserable would it have been for Moses if Moses would have walked away from God and God's calling upon him and Moses didn't receive the blessings that he had from doing God's work? You're holding yourself back from blessings from God. I can contest that when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, when you're living the way that you're supposed to be living, and you're doing the things that God called you to do, you don't really worry about life. I don't really, anymore, I don't worry about a lot of stuff because Holly and I talk about it all the time that when something needs to be done, it's crazy that it's always taken care of. When that $50 extra that we need, or that $100,
or that $300 that I got to throw in my truck for a condenser in the air conditioner. Somehow that stuff just absolutely comes out of nowhere. And that's funny, but that's God. Gilby's laughing because he thought I was going to say something about my truck to him. If God has a calling upon your life, and you're making the same excuses that Moses did, I pity you if you're living with that. I pity you because I don't know how you lay your head down at night. I make excuses and I have to answer for it. I make excuses and I run away. God, I don't need to speak at Mount Olive. I don't, God. There's a lot of chiefs there. There's a lot of great guys that speak there, Lord. There's no reason for me to root myself in. There's no reason for me to speak, God, when there's somebody else to do it. If you don't think don't make excuses. I make them daily to God. Why I don't want to read my Bible. Why I don't want to watch the daily devotion. Why that I don't want to sit down with my family anymore and pray publicly like when we eat. Because we've watered down this life of Christianity. We make excuses. So for the excuses to stop. Moses is not the only example. They're all throughout the Bible. And if you want to go through there and dig in and look at it, it's kind of shocking when you look at how many ones that did make excuses. And that word excuse keeps coming up. Excuse and failure. That's the 1-2 things that go hand in hand that you often see in the Bible together. Excuses and failure. When they tried to do it on their own or run away, then there was failure. But the ones that you see that surrendered to Christ, man, how awesome was it? The rest of this story of Moses going to Pharaoh and getting God's people out. How do you think Moses would have felt if he let Aaron do it? And then saw what all happened. Saw what all God did for Aaron. I would have said that probably a few other things happened up on top of that mountain, and it wasn't God talking, Moses and God talking. It would have felt like a complete failure. I say this all the time because it's the number one thing that goes through my head every day when I study. I don't study every day. Let me reframe that. When I do study, when I talk to God, when I talk to my kids about God, because my daughter has started talking about baptism. But making sure that I say the right things. Making sure that I know enough to say the right thing when it's the right time to say it. Because I don't want to step out of line and say something that I'm not supposed to. Because I don't want to lead somebody in the wrong direction. I feel like leading somebody in the wrong direction is way worse than if you just didn't say anything. And that's something I don't want to kneel before the Lord one day and God say, why did you lead so-and-so totally away from me? Oh, God, I thought I was doing right. You ever think about that, the next situation that you'll come to? Our worship, our mission team's getting ready to go back to Nicaragua. I'm sure they're all thinking about that and the situations that they may come into. But what about when you walk out these doors? What about for you that, you have to pump gas? Somebody comes up to you and says something. We live in a different world. Stevie and I, we've had this discussion about how it's different where they go to Nicaragua and people are so inviting. They want to hear about Christ because they're in such need. And I found it to be very very sad the day that we took our youth out to hand out those boxes. It was great to see the youth doing God's work because a lot of those could have said the same thing. They could have come up with excuses. Man, those kids jumped out of the truck, man, and they were running up that hill. They were ready to go hand out boxes. They didn't know what were in the box. They didn't know if they were giving out a bomb or soap and a Bible. They didn't know, but they were going because they'd been talking about God all week. But when we get up there and we knock on those doors, A lot of times they didn't open this wide. They wanted to know what we were doing. Because we've made it to the point to where it's all about us, of what we can get. They don't want to open the door because they think we're going to ask something of them. We can't go in and give. So the one thing that I want to challenge you guys, whether you're here or people that are watching, it's time we surrender to God. It's time that we stop making the excuses. It's time that we realize that the Creator that we're throwing shade to is the one that created us. No matter what I can fathom in my mind, just like Moses, no matter what excuse I can come up with, I can't out-top the Creator. I can't do it. Because, you know, you read in the Bible and it talks about people having callings and you know, I've always heard growing up that if you didn't use your calling, God would take it from you and He'd give it to somebody else. That's kind of scary. I get my one shot, man. I get my calling and therefore if I don't use it, God's going to take it from me and give it to somebody else. Because God is going to be glorified. No matter if you do it, I do it, TJ does it, somebody's going to do it. And he's going to be glorified. So, and this is kind of short, but I want to challenge you to stop making excuses. It's okay to tell people no sometimes. I'm not saying you got to be a yes man and say yes to everybody. But try it. Don't make excuses. When you're asked to do something, when you're asked of that one small thing, don't conjure up in your head of how it's going to go, or like we talked about, of the situation that may happen, or who's going to be mad, or this one might be upset. Think about what Moses and God. And just try it. See if it doesn't change you just a little bit. See if it doesn't soften your heart just a little bit. It's like, it's very hard. I wanted to go to Nicaragua this time. It's not about me, it's about God. But the people that are going, you know, very well could have come up with excuses when they started talking about it, when they started realizing what it is that we're going to go do while we're down there. That's in the summer. That's probably the number one thing that's popped up in everybody's mind that's going. It's summertime. It's my summer vacation. You're not going to step on my time. Somebody's going and God's going to be glorified. When you come to this church, God's going to be glorified. When you bow down at this altar, God's going to be glorified. When you walk out of here and you're getting your car and you leave, God's going to be glorified. If it's the end of your time and you're driving home and your time ends, somehow, some way in that situation, God's going to be glorified. You can't make excuses when you get there. That's the number one thing that was very adamant my grandmother used to talk to me about, is you're not going to make excuses when you bow before the Lord. You're not going to swindle your way out of what's coming to you. Because you wrote your book and you signed it in pen. And all you're going to do is bow and you're going to have to take it. So I ask you guys, number one, let's surrender to God's calling. Number two, let's stop making excuses. Because it's contagious. God's contagious. When you're in God's work and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, it rubs off to the people beside of you. And you never know the silence that you're not speaking to them, but by your actions speak louder than words to what's going on. And this church is a prime example of that. I can contest to that the first time I walked in here. TJ, I asked him about it one day. I said, "Do you remember that message you preached that day?" "No." "So I do." Every time I sit down, I still think about that message. The first time I heard TJ preaching here. Man, you just never know when you're going to impact what person. You may think that one day that you don't have that world-changing message or the right words to say. You never know what one small thing may impact somebody and change their life forever. So let your guard down just a little bit. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say? Anything that they would like to praise or talk about?
exactly right.
He's got the right person, the right job. It's the person that will get out of the way to make God shine through.
First will be last, and last will be first. Anybody else? I hope all you have a great week. If you guys need anything, I'm always around. I'll give you my number. You just want to call and shoot the bull. I'm that guy. We'll talk for an hour. No. But I hope you guys have a great week. Hope to see you back Sunday. Yes, I'll be here this Sunday. I won't be on. But pray for this church. Pray for Brother TJ. And continue to grow, man. This church it's burning like wildfire. People that are getting saved and baptized every week, and lives that are being changed. It's awesome. And it doesn't go unnoticed when people drive by here. That's for sure. All right, so if y'all bow your heads, we'll be dismissed in a word of prayer. To gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this time that we could gather together in your house, Lord. Father, I pray that we can take your words, God, and we can apply it to our lives. We can go this week, God, and we can stop making excuses, and we can surrender, God, to your calling, no matter what that is that you have on our lives, Lord. No matter how big or how small, Lord, the excuses can stop. Father, I pray that you be with each and every one of us. Allow us to be the head of our household, Lord. Allow us to be the godly examples in this community, Lord, that you've called us to be. Father, I pray that you would go with us and lead us and guide us and direct us. We love you. In your sweet name I pray. Amen.